Good morning, everyone. I hope that everyone is well. I thank you for coming out today. My name is Marilyn Fraser. I'm the CEO of the Arthur Ashe Institute for Urban Health, and I've had the pleasure of being the CEO now for about 9 years, but I've been at the Institute for some time. And so I would like to welcome you on behalf of the board of the Arthur Ashe Institute, as well as of our staff members. I would like to welcome you for being here on our 33rd anniversary. So we deserve a clap for that. We deserve cheers for 33 years. So 33 years ago, Arthur Ashe envisioned the Arthur Ashe Institute for Urban Health, and he was intentional about having the institute here at SUNY Downstate. And he developed the institute. The institute was actually created in the Division of Medical Ethics and Humanities. And that's something that is important as we think about the world that we are living in today and the importance of just humane thinking and humanity and really thinking about those things. But when Arthur founded the Institute, he had a vision about 4 different pillars. One of it was reaching community members, going out into the community, doing community education, and we fulfill that through our community engagement and research work at the Institute. So we go out into non-traditional settings, we call them, that are not as non-traditional anymore. You'll see us in beauty salons and barbershops. We go out into faith-based institutions as well. The second pillar was to increase people of color in the health professions. So there was a diversity pillar. And we do that through our Health Science Academy program, and that's a pathway program for students that are interested in the health professions. And so they come to the Institute. We started that as a 10th through 12th grade program. Students come to the Institute, they're thinking about just nursing and medicine usually as the health professions, but they come and they get exposed to a whole host of different things. So they can think about public health, they can think about research, they can think about occupational therapy, physical therapy, and other things. And so we've decided to move earlier in the pipeline or the pathway, so to speak, and we have a 9th grade bridge program, and then we have a program for middle school students where we go out into middle schools and students get to be exposed to health professions. And then the third pillar is our collaborations, having strategic partnerships, and we do that through our community-based partnerships. We partner with academic institutions, we partner with policymakers, and then the fourth pillar is to inform policy. So although we may do all of this work, informing policy is important to the work that we're doing to make sure that there are systemic changes and that systems are renewed and revived and changed and dismantled and so forth. One of the things I always like to quote something from Arthur Ashe, and one of the quotes I think is so prominent and so pertinent to the world that we're living in is the one in which he says, "I know I could never forgive myself if I elected to live without humane purpose, without trying to help the poor and unfortunate, without recognizing that perhaps the purest joy in life comes from trying to help others." And so that's what we want to do, make sure that we are helping others. So years ago, we envisioned mental health as something that we really wanted to address in our communities. And we know that our environment affects us and affects who we are and the things that we do. And so we decided to create a mental health program and integrate mental health in all the other programs that we were doing, because we know that people do not live in a bubble. They live in reality with different things, environmental issues, stresses, and so forth. And when we think about health, health is just not the absence of disease, as the old World Health Organization definition says. It's not just a mere absence of disease. We need to pay attention to psychosocial issues, social and spiritual issues. So we decided to create our mental health beyond the stigma program. And so today, what you'll get a chance to hear about that program, you'll get a chance to hear about some of the work that we have done in that program. Then you'll get a chance to hear from our keynote speaker, because he's going to talk about the barriers that we face and the things that we need to dismantle and how do we address mental well-being within communities, especially communities of color, and those nuances that take place within our communities. So then after he speaks about that, then you'll get to be part of a discussion, a facilitated discussion where you're able to ask the psychiatrists questions. And this is so that we demystify psychiatry. Oftentimes when people think about psychiatrists, they may have images that are conjured up that are not relevant to it. And so today we want to talk about that and really break down some of that stigma and the barriers affiliated with that. And then after we do that, one of the things that we want to really talk about is resources. So you've heard about all the issues that are happening in mental health. You've heard from psychiatrists, and then we want to provide you with resources. So we'll have a team that'll come up and share resources with you. And then we'll come back, summarize that, and we'll break for lunch, and you'll have a wonderful lunch as always. And we'll ask you to come back into the room so that you can receive instructions for later in the day where we'll have breakout sessions. And our breakout sessions today, we really want them to be interactive. We want you to, and we've listened to you from the last couple of years that you want interaction, you want to be in sessions where you can talk, where you can ask questions, and where you're able to do certain things. So they're hands-on sessions, and they're fun. You know, sometimes as we get older, we forget to play and we forget what fun is like, but we need to go back to that at times and just remember that. So that is what the day is going to be like. And so at the end of the day, Humberto Brown, who is one of our staff members, he's going to come and he's going to wrap it up for you. But before we get started officially, well, I did the official start, but before we get into the other things that you're here for, we want to have a grounding exercise. So I'll call on Stacy Wright. She's a licensed clinical social worker, and Stacy has worked with the Institute for many years. And I had the pleasure of, I don't know, spending hours one day in my living room going through what a symposium should be like and all the different parts of it. So I'm asking Stacy to come on right now, and we'll start off with a grounding exercise. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. To mark our transition into this space, I just want to invite you all to please join us in a moment to honor our breath together. So when I first started working in the space of social justice and mental health, I was reading Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown, and I love this quote. And so it says, "Here you are in the cycle between the past and the future, choosing to spend your miraculous time in the exploration of how humans, especially those seeking to grow liberation and justice, can learn from the world around us, how to best collaborate and how best to shape change." So with that quote, I want us to take breaths together. So I'm going to read a statement, and I want you to take a breath with me. So just to get started, I just want everyone to get comfortable in your seat. If you can, make sure that your spine is supported and put your feet on the ground. And really just feel your feet and where your body is right now. If you feel comfortable, close your eyes. If not, try to find a space where you can focus. Just focus your attention there for the next couple of minutes. And with me, before we start, I just want you to take a deep breath. So into the belly, put your hand on your belly if you can, and a hand on your heart, and take a deep breath and push the belly out as far as you can as you fill it with breath. So inhale, fill the belly with air. And exhale through the mouth and let it go flat. Think of a pancake. One more time, deep inhale. Fill the belly like a balloon. Exhale. Release all the air from the balloon. Last time, deep inhale. And exhale. Now, without opening your eyes and staying with me, I want you to take a breath for our ancestors, for those that have gone before us. Deep inhale and exhale. I want you to take a breath for the land that we're on and those that it was stolen from. Deep inhale and exhale. I want you to take a deep breath for this precious moment that cannot be recreated. Deep inhale and exhale. A breath for all the days you've had so far and for all that you have overcome. Deep inhale and exhale. A breath for this work that we will do together today. Deep inhale and exhale. And now, one breath for all the good that lies ahead of us. Deep inhale and exhale. Thank you all for pausing with me as we enter this space. I'll turn it over to Kenya Kirkman, who will take you on a journey through the work that we've been doing for these past few years.
Thanks, Stacy. As I mentioned, that we have been doing a lot of work in the mental health space, and that work has been spearheaded by one of our team members, Kenya Kirkman, and she has worked with a lot of people here, and so at this time, I would like Kenya to come up. She's a senior program coordinator at the Arthur Ashe Institute, and I'd like you to welcome Kenya as she comes and talks about her work and the work that we have done together.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. It's a pleasure to see you all, so many familiar faces. But before I begin, I do want to bring up one of our peer alum. I'm going to be talking extensively about our peer leadership program. But before we begin, we would like to start with a poem from Joanna Blake.
Hello, my name is Joanna Blake, and I wrote a poem called Selfless. You take care of everyone around you, checking blood pressures and temperatures too, but who stops to care for you? Who tends for your emotional and mental needs? Do you make time for yourself the way you pour time into others? Do you bandage the quiet wounds that bleed, or do you pretend like they don't bother you? You hold on, fearless, pushing through the worst, but every story has its lesson. And soon you'll see you cannot save everyone if you refuse to save yourself first.
Thank you, Joanna. And I remember when she came to the program last year, she shared that she was a poet, and that was her offering, and she was very shy. And fast forward to now, every time we call her and ask her if she's willing to give us an offering, she does. So thank you, Joanna. So I'm here to tell you a little bit about our Beyond the Stigma, essentially our portfolio. Just to give a little bit of context, we started this program 5 years ago at the height of the pandemic. And so 2020, it might seem like it was a long time from now, but the last 5 years, we've been really in the community with young people, adults, a lot of our partners. And so the work started with the support from UNICEF USA. It was the first time that they'd done an initiative or a program in the US. And we really just started off to have a collective conversation about mental health, how it's impacting young people specifically. We started with an extensive needs assessment, and so we had key informant interviews with educators, faith-based leaders, teachers, parents. And then from that, we recognized that we were going to design anything for young people, we had to also involve them in the conversations. And so we set out after our key informant interviews, and we had listening sessions. In those listening sessions, we had ages 12 all the way up to 24, actually. really engage with us and kind of share their knowledge, their perceptions around mental health. What were some of the barriers that they were facing? What were some existing supports that they knew about or they did not know about? And in those listening sessions, we really learned from them that a lot of them said if they were going through anything challenging, they were 9 times out of 10 go to their friends. There were a few who shared that they would, go to a loved one, a parent, or a sibling, but there was a vast majority that shared they would go to their friends. And so we recognize that if young people are going to each other when they're having challenges, they might not have the language, and so we needed to equip them. We also heard a lot about, unfortunately, there were young people experiencing friends who have either attempted suicide or unfortunately was successful. And so we also recognized that we had to equip young people with resources that, because they're young and that they might not be able to cope with and mediate. And so from that, we designed the Beyond the Stigma program into 2 pillars. It was our peer leadership program as well as our community education workshop. And a lot of this work would not have been possible without our strategic partnerships. And so we partner with barbershops and salons, which for a lot of people who are familiar with the Institute, we have a long-standing partnership with barbershops and salons, specifically in Central Brooklyn. We partner with faith-based institutions, as I mentioned, with that needs assessment, as well as when we develop the actual program. We went into housing developments. We worked with senior centers, community-based organizations. The first year, in 2021, we worked with a lot of CBOs to kind of get young people to be a part of our program. And so it was really, really heavy that we relied on their support. After-school programs, middle schools, as well as colleges. So in the last 5 years, we've had over 50 total partnerships, and we have engaged 20 new partnerships outside of those that we were already familiar with. As Dr. Frazier mentioned earlier, we also incorporated a lot of our mental health work into our other programs, so our cardiovascular work, our HIV work, even maternal health and things like that. So it was a lot of partnerships in the last 5 years to really make sure that we heard what the people were experiencing in the community, and recognizing that also, young people are not in silos, and so we had to also equip their parents, educators, their grandparents, and you name it. And so our program has been extensive in the last 5 years, and we've done them in different spaces. With our community education workshops, that was really tailored to individuals 18 and over. We also coined something called a pay and heal. Some of you will actually get to experience that today. We also had supportive spaces, because we also heard from the community about how accessibility, they wanted to attend our workshops, but either work, school, and so we set up a supportive space that was virtual. We attended tabling events. We also partnered with, again, going back to our strategic partnerships, we also partnered with Lyft, or City Bike, for those who are familiar. And we had these community mental health wellness bikes to kind of address 2 issues. One, transportation deserts, especially in areas like Brownsville, Canarsie. We also had some bike rides in Bedford-Stuyvesant as well. And then we also had our annual mental health symposium. And so in the last 5 years, again, just starting from what is some of the needs that young people need, what are some of the needs of our community, and how do we address that, and what is the best ways that we can meet people where they're at. And so recognizing that we had somewhat of a duty to them to kind of meet people where they're at, we did our programming in these spaces. And so to date, we have had 60+ events. I'm really, really proud of a lot of the work that we've done. Specifically with our youth program, from where Joanna is from, a little bit about that. When we first started, it was about a 2-week program, and a lot of the young people shared that that wasn't enough time. And so to date, it is now 6 weeks, but essentially we work with high school students over the summers predominantly. And we engage them in conversations about what is impacting their mental health. Again, what is their knowledge, perceptions? What are some barriers to getting support? What are some known resources that they know about? And in the end of the 6 weeks, they are tasked with actually developing their own workshop to go out into the community and share with other young people. And so some of the topics that young people have said that were really important to them as it pertains to mental health has been violence and mental health, social media and their mental health. This past summer, there was a workshop around body dysmorphia and just like body imaging and how that impacts their mental health. So really using topics that they feel are important and how they address those messages. So to date, in the last 5 years, we have trained 67 peer leaders and we have engaged over 800 youth. Another highlight in our youth programming is that as of 2023, we started to have a youth summit here at Downstate, again, trying to really access more young people outside of our peer program and how we can engage them. Each year, the summit is themed around something different, and so our first year was really about the epidemic of loneliness. This year was about connecting now that we are at the other tail end, I guess, of the pandemic, like how are people reconnected with one another, especially young people. Especially when we think about AI, when we think about social media. And so really using this youth summit to really engage more young people. These are just, again, some of the numbers. 67 have been trained. We engage a lot of young people in our peer leadership program through our peer-led workshops. A lot of those workshops are also in partnerships with CBOs. We've worked with CBOs like Diaspora Community Services, just to name a few, but again, really engaging young people in their networks and also their community members. When it comes to our community education workshops, again, the barbershops and salons, the faith-based institutions have been really strong partnerships in that, and so in the last 5 years, we have engaged over 2,500 members. And this is just some of the newspaper articles or just the publication about the work in the last 5 years and how the Institute has really, again, met the community where they're at. And so, again, when we first started with UNICEF USA and their support, and then over the last 5 years about some of the work and, again, addressing the needs of young people. And now I've been talking a lot, and so we actually want to hear a little bit from our young people. We have about 4 or 5 of our peer leaders from across the 5 years, and so I will call up Joanna Blake again, Kaisa Wade, Dakota, Yasmel. We could give them a clap, a round of applause. They volunteered to come today. Elijah as well, I believe, is here, and we will hear from them.
Hi, it's me again. My name is Joanna Blake. I go to New Heights Academy Charter School, which is located in Harlem, and I am a 16-year-old junior. I participated in this program 2024, and what I've taken away from the program is how social disparities work. Before entering this program, I didn't have a lot of information about the different locations and how location can affect how you get medical resources. I actually learned from this program that the #1 aspect of determining health resources is your area code, which is crazy. And that showed me how just because of where you live, it limits the amount of resources that you get. And I think that's very important for communities that have very low income neighbors and that are struggling economically. And yeah, and I feel like that program will help me throughout college and my high school years and help me understand my peers better and also help me understand myself better.
Hi, I'm Kaisa Wade. I am a freshman at Hunter College. I started Beyond the Stigma in 2024, but I've been here for about 3 summers. And similar to Joanna, before I started working here, I didn't know a lot about, mental health, sexual health, social detriments. I didn't even know public health was like a field to begin with, or other fields like social work, psychiatry, which I'm excited to hear about later. And working here has given me a lot of motivation to do more community outreach. to do more research, to learn more about and talk more about the topics that matter to my peers and the community around us. And that's part of the reason why I'm aspiring to be a public health major. And I'm just thankful for everybody here who I've worked with and spoken to.
Hello, my name is Yasmo Carrasco. I attend Bronx Prep High School. When I first came here, it did not just impact me academically, it impacted me personally, professionally, and emotionally. One of the biggest things I've learned is that change happens when somebody decides to listen. When I first began to come into this program, I had this desire to create a change in my community in the Bronx. Ever since then, with the amount of knowledge and the amount of education that I've learned about mental health, it has inspired me to pursue a career in social work. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Dakota. I'm a senior at the High School for Youth and Community Development at Erasmus, and I'm also a member of the Health Science Academy, so maybe I'll run into some of you on Wednesdays, you never know. But this summer program really helped me to understand how to talk to my peers better. I was always the person that people would go to, like, you know, when they had a problem and when they needed someone to talk to. And so the program really did increase my vocabulary when it comes to mental health things, but also it helped me better understand how to connect with people and how to help them get through things when they need that help.
Hello, my name is Elijah Antoine, and I go to Eagle Academy for Young Men, Southeast Queens. I attended this program in 2025, so this summer, and it really impacted me by just allowing me to be able to be there for my friends, my families that needed mental help, because I have a lot of friends, and a lot of kids my age go through a lot of things, and they don't know who to talk to. They, like Ms. Kenya said, they normally go to their friends. So I saw this program as a way to, help my friends, my community. So, I joined it, and I had a lot of fun. I would love to do it again. And, yeah, thank you.
Thank you all. I hear you all the time about you would like to do it again and can I create other programs for you, but just want to say how proud to hear you guys speak about just the program impact. All of you have grown, so really, really proud of you, and thank you for always volunteering. Can we give them another round of applause? All right. So I'll be around, but also I think really quickly before I leave, this is a collective effort. I know that I have kind of spearheaded a lot of this in the last 5 years, but the entire Institute staff have been really tremendous in this work, so I just also want to acknowledge that, so thank you. Dr. Frazier.
Thanks again. It was so inspiring just hearing from our young people and all the things that they've learned in such a short time. So we are really proud of them. At this time, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker to you. Dr. Evan Auguste is an assistant professor of psychology at John Jay College of Criminal Justice and is a scholar in residence at Boston College's Institute for Study of Race and Culture. And so he received his Ph.D. in clinical psychology with a major area of focus in forensic psychology, and that was from Fordham University back in 2022. So Dr. Auguste identifies as Haitian American, and that identity as a Haitian American man has helped to inform his work in how he examines the U.S.'s history of anti-Blackness, and it has shaped his psychological realities both within the U.S. and outside of this country. He also directs the ASILI Collective, and that's a research group that focuses broadly on addressing mental health consequences and structural anti-Blackness. He has written, recently published, an edited volume of The Carceral State, and forensic psychology and Black resistance, let them not be forgotten. And so you should speak to him more about that after he speaks in the Q&A. And that offers psychological tools and praxis to resist state violence and co-create community justice. He currently chairs the Sawubona Healing Circle program and is on the board of the Institute for Development of Human Arts and on the leadership team for Incultured Company. So today, it's my pleasure to bring Dr. Auguste to the podium, and he will be talking to you about From Wound to Wisdom, Healing Circles and the Reclamation of Black Consciousness. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Evan Auguste. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This is like a deep, deep honor. My mother's right here in the crowd, and one of my, what's going on, Natasha? How you doing? One of my earliest home videos that we have of me is me being born with my parents, and them saying that they wanted me to be a tennis player. Unfortunately, I was not nearly that talented. I hit all the balls over the fence. So I figured this would be the next best thing, is honoring the legacy of Arthur Ashe. And so what this talk is going to do, and I loved hearing about the work that was just shared, right? Breaking the stigma, showing that it's our people who have all the wisdom necessary to heal us in this time. And what I want to do through this first part of this talk is talk about the other side of stigma, right? Not just the ways that our people need to embrace mental health, but ways in which aspects of mental health have been crafted against us, right? Against Black people, and the ways that we continue to fight against that. I want us to begin by grounding in Arthur Ashe's analysis of the current predicament, right? So this is Arthur Ashe. He said this in his memoir. He said, "As for the very existence of African Americans in the United States, I truly believe that many people wish that we would go away, vanish, cease to exist. Doubtless, even many Blacks have that feeling and wish that they could lose their color in a tide of whiteness." Right? The idea that for us to exist in this country, for us to exist in this society, is dealing with a constant wave of people who want to erase not just our bodies, but our minds, our way of understanding the world, and our way that we want to love one another. To paint this out, right, I'm a professor, so we're going to go a little bit into some of the history, some of the frameworks that exist. Some scholars have talked about this concept, this idea of internal colonialism. Right? To shape what this looks like, we can look only back to 2020. We had the largest mass mobilization of Black people with a very specific, tight policy goal, right? We want to reshape how safety looks like in our communities. We want to reshape how policing looks like in our communities. And in response, in the years immediately following these mass protest movements, in fact, throughout the country, you saw police budgets balloon, right? Very tight, very specific, coordinated efforts, and we see the state move in the exact opposite direction in many instances. We had in 2020 and 2021 the associations, the largest associations of psychologists, of psychiatrists, of medicine, right, admit to near genocidal projects of harm against Black peoples. I want people to take time, right? In 2020, a lot of societies were putting out statements and apologies for racism, and I don't think we fully sat with the full weight of what they were admitting to. Right? Within psychology, we're talking about a project of eugenics, right? Projects of death, of harm, right? For our major associations that we look to for health. We know, and this is from some of the work of one of my colleagues at Howard University, Marcus Board Jr., talks about how often Black political will is strategically dismissed, right? There will be on the surface, acts and efforts that seem to honor that, but in terms of the actual policy that gets put into place, we often see it moved in the exact opposite direction. And so for people who have a very wise, a very consistent view of how we want to look after ourselves and to have that consistently dismissed, right? Harold Cruz, Kwame Ture described that as the state of an internal colony, right? I want to name that, although I was reading through his memoir, Arthur Ashe had some choice words to say for Kwame Ture and the Black Power movement. I think the piece that a lot of them did agree with is the state of harm that we are experiencing. And so that's our political state, right? That's the economic and structural state that we exist in. What I want us to understand is how this impacts us psychologically. Right? That's a lot of the work that I do, is how does this structural consequence, this structural context, how does that impact us psychologically? Right? The psychologist who educated a number of the Black Panthers in Chicago, Bobby Wright, described this as menticide. Right, so menticide is the psychological consequences specifically, right, of state-based policy. Right, when they deny our will, when they deny the way that we want to take care of one another, when they police us when we need care, right, this has downstream psychological effects. Right, and so some of the research has demonstrated this distorts our identity, it distorts our consciousness, and there are several downstream effects. We've already talked about previously suicidality, depression, right? Post-traumatic as well as complex trauma. Right? A lot of the psychological consequences that we want to show up for each other and help us deal with are downstream of these specific policy decisions. And it frames, again, these structural harms as personal pathology. So what I want us to do is become critical consumers then of psychology and mental health. Right? It's not merely that there are a lot of individual racists, right? It's that structurally a lot of the things that we look to for health have been conspired to move against us. I'm a big fan of this quote. How you doing? I'm a big fan of this quote by Terry Ellis Pickens. She says, "Within the United States cultural zeitgeist, there's no blackness without madness, nor madness without blackness." What she's saying here is often we think the problem is, right, there are a lot of racist people who are doing mental health. If we get other types of people doing mental health, it'll be better. But what our research, what our history, what our science shows us is the way that we've constructed psychology, the way that we've constructed mental health, the way that we've constructed the mind has been done, right, to subjugate and erase, right, the psychologies and the consciousness of Black people. And this is not esoteric, this is not niche history. This is from some of the largest psychologists and psychological thinkers that we have. Right? G. Stanley Hall, I don't know if people have taken intro yet. G. Stanley Hall is the first American psychologist. In some of his earliest writings, right, he talked about how the African person needed to be in a context of enslavement in order for there to be a healthy society. He described that state as the natural one for African American people and saw the consistent surveillance of Black people as necessary for white America to have health. Carl Jung, right, a very influential psychodynamic thinker. A lot of his ideas around the collective unconscious came from his interactions with the Ugandan and the Bantu peoples. Right? And instead of seeing that as a wondrously complex society and people, he saw that as the most base form of human being. And so his very idea of psychoanalysis was based on the fact that African people had a primitive consciousness. Right? This shapes the development of psychodynamic and therapeutic practice. You know, we move towards a Robert Yerkes. Robert Yerkes is one of the earliest presidents of the American Psychological Association, and in his advocacy, he said that gorillas were better suited for the menial tasks of society than Black people because of IQ. These are not niche figures, these are foundational figures in the construction of psychology and mental health. And so these ideas, these theories, they lead to diagnoses, right? They lead to the very practice of this field. So some people might have heard of drapetomania. Anybody heard of drapetomania before? I'm saying yes, a few people. Right? Drapetomania, constructed by Samuel Cartwright, was the idea that when Black people desired freedom, when they pursued freedom, right, that represented a mental illness, again, because the natural condition of the African person was to be enslaved. And to move against your natural condition was seen as insanity. For anybody who knows a little bit of history, I know I got at least one Haitian person here, right? Samuel Cartwright, right, said the largest example of drapetomania was actually the Haitian Revolution, right? We move forward, right, we go to the early 1900s, we see a lot of psychologists, a lot of even liberal psychologists move forward with this idea that black people have a general intellectual inferiority, right, that their minds are less developed, right, and so that we need to engage in a project of eugenics by societies like the Human Betterment Foundation to remove people from the gene pool. We move forward to the 60s and 70s. You have a group of psychiatrists who create the idea of the protest psychosis. Right? The protest psychosis, some people might have heard of this, is the idea when they started institutionalizing disproportionately black men who were on the front lines of the Black Power movement. Right? They were taking their presentation, they were taking their politics and allowing it to reshape their idea of psychosis. So the idea of schizophrenia that we have now, right, is based on the specific and intentional oppression of black political actors during the Black Power movement. And we see a series, right, a wave of systematic institutionalization. Right? I know we have some psychiatrists coming up afterwards. I see this right here. Right? I want to pull from Frantz Fanon. Right? He's a legendary revolutionary psychiatrist who says psychiatry is an auxiliary of the police. The way in which this field historically and at times right now in the modern day is used is to reinforce these specific forms of harm, right? To reinform the status quo, to maintain the state of African American people as a resource-deprived internal colony. And so how does this look like today then? Right? I told y'all that the protest psychosis reshaped our idea of schizophrenia, and we continue to see this. Right? We know when black and white people present with similar symptoms, black people are more likely to be diagnosed with psychotic disorders. White people are more likely to be diagnosed with mood disorders. We know when in vignette studies, when they do specifically psychotic symptoms, black people are more likely to advocate for the use of police against black people. People are more likely to advocate for the use of care for white people. Right? And so this idea, this perceived psychosis, which we knew is rooted, right, in state repression, is believed to be one of the mechanisms that drives the disproportionate institutionalization of black people. But what I want us to also carry, right, so this is the way that we do health, right, this is the way that we experience distress is pathologized. When I talked about drapetomania, I wanted to be clear, right, drapetomania isn't about only how we experience stress, it's how we pursue freedom. And so we know there's also contemporary responses to black consciousness, right? Our black political will that continue that same legacy. We know that about 7 years ago, that black identity extremism became a priority for the FBI. We know that the FBI intentionally embedded informants throughout several racial justice movements moving into 2020. We know that protest-related charges were federalized so that prosecutors could penalize people for engaging in their civic duties with greater intensity. We saw that this was racialized, right? A number of journalists revealed that for engaging in similar types of engagements, black and white people had disparate charges, with black people facing harsher criminal penalties. And we also have reported instances throughout the US of the police infiltrating and sabotaging community forms of justice and care. And what I want to note is this is all prior to Project 2025. This all prior to our contemporary moment where we have ICE on the streets, where we have people specifically criminalizing the study of our history and our education. I know a lot of professors at HBCUs right now who are telling me that they're afraid to teach about the way that we can take care of our people. Right? So all this is going on before we even reach to this moment. So then what do we do? Right? What do we do when we're faced with this wave of racial harm, this wave of racial trauma, this politicized attacks? I want us to also take a note of the context and the structure of our current mental health force. This comes from the Association of Black Psychologists. They did a workforce report, I believe, in 2022 or 2023. We know that for this scale and this weight of harm, Black people only make up about 4 to 5% of the total mental health workforce. We know that 28% of people in the Black people in the mental health workforce considered leaving because of burnout, race-related stress, and the increased workload. And we know that 62% of those Black mental health workers reported receiving no training specifically on how to treat Black people. I describe this as the other side of stigma because I know there's been a really large movement to make sure that Black people are aware and are open to receiving mental health care. And I believe it's extremely important for us to apply the same critical eye to the mental health structure that we're asking people to embrace. This is Thomas Insel. He's the former director of the NIMH, who says, I spent 13 years at the NIMH really pushing on the neuroscience and genetics of mental disorders. And when I look back on that, I realized that while I think I succeeded in getting lots of really cool papers published by cool scientists at fairly large cost, I think 20 billion, I don't think we moved the needle in reducing suicide, reducing hospitalizations, improving recovery for the tens of millions of people who have mental illness. That's the current structure of our mental health apparatus, and we know it is significantly more dire for our people. And so I was a part of a task force during the pandemic, co-chaired with Dr. Jonisha Hickson, in rejecting the American Psychological Association's apology for racism because it was incomplete. It did not reference the totality of the history that I'm talking to you about right now. The way that these forces are not only in history, they continue to assault us day by day. If you go to any of these hospitals, I worked at a forensic hospital for a number of years, it is disproportionately Black people who are in their pain and in their stress are invisibilized and erased and harmed inside these institutions. And we need a psychology, we need a practice that embraces the fullness of our political reality. I'm gonna pull again from Arthur Ashe, who said, I myself do not have to be convinced that Europeans are skeptical about scientific claims by Africans emerging out of Africa, or that many whites do not associate scientific discoveries with Blacks. The image of Africa remains disfigured by notions of ignorance and superstition that were so carefully draped about the continent over the centuries. So what I want to suggest to you all is that we have the type of wisdom, we have the type of science, we have the type of spirit that we can lean on to address the fullness of the harm that we are currently experiencing. The people you see before you are some of the pioneers in the African-centered healing circle movement. You see Enola Aird, Mami Huberta Jackson-Loman, Cheryl Grills, Anel Prim, Theopia Jackson, and Daryl Rowe, many of whom who do work with the Association of Black Psychologists, and over the last 30 years have been really key in uplifting and training people globally in the art of African-centered healing circles. So what are African-centered healing circles is a great question. I'm happy you asked. That's why I'm here today, right? So African-centered healing circles are a grassroots, community-driven, sacred space, right? As opposed to trying to lean more and more into the professionalization of care, we want to return, as right, the Arthur Ashe Institute is doing, return the technologies of care to the people who are most impacted, right? And we ground them in these histories and in these wisdoms of care, right, of our African and African diasporic tradition and cultures. Right? A lot of African-centered psychologists are very key. As long as people have been alive, as long as people have existed, they've also been inquiring to what it means to be well and what it means to be. Right? And so leaning into some of those wisdom and those philosophies to co-create spaces of care and health. And because of this, they're specifically targeted towards the emotional, spiritual, and psychological wounds of this consistent political attack on our people. And these are not just theories, right? I'm very key to say this. I'm an assistant professor. I engage in the work of science. And we've demonstrated efficacy, right, in reducing the symptoms of racial trauma, people who have experienced community violence, and deep grief. Right? We have several academic papers that are published now and several that are coming out in the following years. And these are key, right? In these spaces, in these circles, we don't rely on the expertise of an individual professional, right? They're non-hierarchical spaces that honor the way that we all show up for one another. Right? Y'all saw that talked about in the youth program, right? When you allow people to heal in community, you see a tremendous amount of success. What I want to name, specifically for this piece, is they're also a conduit for what me and a number of my colleagues and people before us call a collective Black consciousness. So it's not only that they help us heal from psychological pain, it helps us construct a political future. So collective Black consciousness, as described by my colleague, this is an initiative led by Nkemka and Yewo, is a living synergy of ways of knowing and being that is oriented toward the collective actualization and liberation of Black communities. Collective Black consciousness is love in practice. It is shaped by transcendence of physical space and time to access the deepest manifestations of Black cultural wisdom. Right? This is the way historically our freedom fighters, our political organizers, our soldiers have thought about what it means to be well. We also have a really beautiful photo. Right? So you can see right here on the figure the dimensions of this collective Black consciousness. Right? So surrounded, shaped by socio-political transcendence and liberatory practice, right? That is what shapes our collective Black consciousness. Several key pillars being a collective Black identity. It's not about the individual, it's about how we show up and how we identify with the collective, right? Collective Black knowledge, right? Knowledge of our history, right? The way that we've been, the way that we've acted in order to support a collective Black wisdom, right? How do we use this knowledge in order to better our people? All of which surrounds and uplifts a Black radical love, right? The way that we show up for one another to liberate one another. And so what I want to show to you all is how our Sawubona healing circles, right, shape and promote not just the reduction in psychological stress, but the promotion of this liberatory vision. So the Sawubona healing circles in 2020 were created in response to a call from Leonard Dunstan, who was the past leader of the Black Family Summit. They were developed by the Association of Black Psychologists. I was honored to co-chair that along with Dr. Tania Lodge. Again, these are community-defined evidence approach, right? We allow the community to define whether or not we're being effective and how they want us to shift and change our practice. And so over the last 5 years, we've trained over 200 Healing Circle leaders globally. They've been held in Haiti, the Dominican Republic, South Africa, United Kingdom, Jamaica. We actually have a special circle specifically for people who experienced displacement during the hurricane in Jamaica on Friday, and more in response to significant political and racial trauma. So I want to demonstrate to you all how do our circles shape consciousness. And so what I'm going to pull from is a qualitative analysis that our researchers did, led by Angela Haney and Sherelle Bellamy, both at the Yale School of Medicine. We interviewed several people who had attended the healing circles for an extended period of time to watch how they shifted their consciousness. So we saw, and I'm going to show a quote of each pillar, right? We saw the growth in people's engagement in liberatory practice. From participant 100, somebody said, "My identity now is that I no longer take institutional abuse. I know my rights. I can stand in a place of, yes, this is happening, but I can also advocate for myself from a place of strength because of Sawubona. I didn't have that before." Right. We see socio-political transcendence. It allows me to have a lot more grace and to stop taking the things that I experience so personally, because across the country, this stuff is systemic. And even across the world, as Black folks, we deal with the gaslighting and the othering. It has impacted me positively to have a space to not feel gaslit and feel validated by the experiences that I've gone through. It's shaping a collective Black identity, right? So these practices, right, shape a way of understanding ourselves in unison. 104 said, "I understand my community as something more than just people from Brazil. I understand my community as Black folks sharing the same experience throughout the Americas and also from Africa. Sometimes we belong to another class or we have another gender. I had to think, okay, we are African descent. We have to think the same way. It's not true. When I meet an African person who doesn't think the same way, I have this empathy. And it's my brother and sister. We are under the same system and the same situation, maybe denying, but with respect. And so we see this across the board with a lot of the people who attend our healing circles, is the growth in these ideas of kinship and these senses of collectivity. It shapes collective Black knowledge, right? The way that we understand ourselves and our history. We had people from all over the world, someone from Liberia educating us. Everybody just came with a wealth of knowledge. We found out about why certain observances came about. We talked about death. We talked about happiness. We talked about gun violence. Every conversation. I have not been on a Salbonian healing circle where I have not been impacted by something from the group. Right? And again, these are not people who are traditional scholars. These are not people who are traditional psychologists. It's demonstrating that everybody in their life experience has something to offer and to better the collective knowledge of people who are present, which shapes collective Black wisdom. I feel stronger. I had to wait a long time to feel strong, to have answers for all kinds of situations, and also to protect others when they are victims of direct racism in front of my eyes, right? So taking those histories, right, taking those legacies and using it to better understand from a place of wisdom how to support one another. And all of this, right, leads to the growth of what we call a Black radical love. From participant 100, how many lifetimes do I have to be miserable? I don't. I know what that place is. It's a dark place, and I don't ever want to go back there again. So Salbona has helped me stay in this beautiful, wonderful place. For me, the outside world's hate is the sunken place, and I'm never going to that sunken place again. The circles help me stay out of the sunken place. So I wanted to close with another quote he gave in an interview to UCLA when he was promoting his book. He said, Arthur Ashe said, I would open up the LA Times and see that students from North Carolina A&T and Morgan State and Howard, are being attacked by dogs and have horses on them. They're being beat over the head for sitting in a restaurant. That's what I used to see in the LA Times when I was at UCLA. And if you were Black and from the South and had any feeling at all, you felt you should be sitting there with them. In our time right now, we're experiencing significant ICE violence, significant state violence, significant specific targeted precarity. I want to close with honoring that legacy. Right? The way that we heal through this, right, the way that we build forward is by sitting in a circle together, being intentional and being honest about our situation so that we can build our future. Right? What always is said in the circles is that we are each other's medicine. Right? And that's how we build forward. Thank you very much.
No, you can stay. Okay. They are the chairs. Thank you so much. Let's give Dr. Auguste another round of applause for that. So we wanted to open up at this time for questions that you may have. There are mics located in the front of the room. So if you have questions, we'll ask that you come to the mic and so that we can have the questions answered. Yes, see a hand over here. If you could come up to the mic so that they can hear you, because it's being recorded. So if you can speak into the mics when you come up so that we can get the questions answered as quickly as possible.
My question is, can you touch as a Black man, and I'm sure throughout your career you have experienced the emotional impact of how mental wellness and mental health is being viewed by society. So can you touch on the societal pressure and perception of mental health of Black men?
Yeah, of course. It's a great question. I think the thing that I've struggled with the most is this, I think, paradox that structurally people put Black men in at times. I've noticed there's this big movement to ask Black people to be more, or Black men in particular, more forthcoming about their emotions, about the way that they show up, about what they're going through and what they're feeling. And without the full, I think, context that it can be a very dangerous thing to do. You know, I had a colleague of mine, she's again, brilliant psychologist, she's a white woman, who came to me asking for help with one of her cases. It was somebody at the VA. It was a Black man who wouldn't open up to her, and we're talking, and it's like, I don't know how to get this, macho man to open up. He don't want to do it. What's going on? And I asked her, okay, how did he get to you? He said, well, so he had gone into the VA, asked for services, explained how miserable he was. They institutionalized him, right? Day one. Right? And so this is somebody who's seen, if I am vulnerable, if I explain how I'm feeling, the pain that I'm going through, is going to be read as either dangerous to myself or to other people. Right? And so there's an unfair predicament we put people in without addressing that we haven't created a safe context for people to feel the entirety of their emotions. Working at a lot of the state hospitals, I see so many cases like that. And so I say that's the biggest bind, where I think we have to address this, structurally. Not just asking, what can we do to make people be more vulnerable? How can we build the skill set to make it safe for people to be vulnerable? Right? Asking both of those things. They're both issues. I think we put a little bit more pressure on one than the other, is what I would say. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I think there's another question over here.
Hey.
No.
Okay. All right. Hey. Thank you, Dr. Auguste, for this presentation. I have so many things to say, but I'm just going to keep it brief. You mentioned the way we structure psychology, right, is the issue. So to me, my question is, how do you dismantle that? Like, does that mean now that everything that psychology is built on is no longer? Like, we need to reframe the way that we think about these things? And then also, I want you to talk a little bit about Black consciousness. And I can't remember if it was Toussaint Louverture or Jean-Jacques Dessalines that said that everyone now is Black. Mm-hmm. I don't remember which one. But
Dessalines.
Dessalines, okay, thank you. And I'm wondering if this definition of Black consciousness that you put on the screen is the same as Dessalines. And what I take Dessalines to say is that Blackness, whiteness, all of this is just a construct. And we've created society around this construct. And I think for liberation to occur, I think we need to transcend, I love that word, I think we need to transcend these limited beliefs of who we are based on a skin color, based on a last name, based on an accent, a language that you speak. We're more than that. And I think that the sunken place is the place where we believe in these limited identities. And so for us to understand that there is no separation, I think that that's really the foundation of what true mental health is to realize that you are not separate from anything. The universe, the world, people, no matter if you look different or whatever, those are inconsequential. So that's what I wanted to say.
Beautiful.
Basically.
I love this. So you had two questions. The first of which was, what do we do if psychology has been constructed this way? And the other one was a deeper question about consciousness, right? So to the first piece, I'm a Black psychologist with a capital B, right? There are, as Karenga dictates them, right, about 3 schools of Black psychology that dictate what do we do within the broader field of psychology. So there are some people who advocate for what's called the traditional school, right, which is I'm going to just engage in the general practice of psychology in an anti-racist way. right? I know that my colleagues are racist. I'm going to do the best I can with the tools that I have to show up for the people in front of me, right? That's seen as like the traditional school. That's like a Alvin Poussin. That's like a Kenneth Clark, Mamie Clark, for example. There's the more reformist branch, which is saying there's been a lot of really strong foundation placed in psychology. We just need some novel ideas, right? Some new concepts that we can better work with our people, right? So people like a William Cross, who goes ahead and develops this specific idea of the development of Black identity. There's people like a Helen Neville, who does a lot of really great work on the impact of colorblind ideology, as an example. So people were saying, psychology, there's a lot of good stuff here. We just need to add some new arms to it so we could better hold our people. I do a lot of my work from between this second school and what's called the third school, the radical school of Black psychology, which is saying we need to build up an entirely new field, right? This is people like a Wade Nobles, people like an Asa Hilliard, like a Linda James Myers, who are saying, as opposed to rooting our idea of the mind in, let's say, Enlightenment era thought, let's honor the indigenous wisdoms of people that have always existed, and then what do our theories and ideas about the mind look like if we root our psychology, if we begin our study of psychology there. So you'll see a lot of those people who study indigenous peoples globally. They'll look at River Nile civilizations and thinking about their ideas and theories of the mind, and then the entire theory moves from that. A lot of the contemporary Black psychologists theorize a lot from the philosophies of the Bantu Congo peoples, as an example. So I lean more towards that. I think within the Haitian historical tradition, there's a lot of emphasis on that piece as well, right? How can we use the knowledge, spiritual system of Vodou as a healing practice and philosophy? So I think there's a lot of real effort there. Our healing circles lean into that school of psychology. The second question you had was about Black consciousness broadly. I want to name that in terms of our specific construction of Black consciousness, it rests on a lot of the work of Steve Biko that he was doing in apartheid South Africa, but it also honors all the liberatory fighters, all the traditions, right? Not just the people who fought for freedom in Haiti, but also the Maroon societies throughout the Americas, as an example. And I would agree with you, right? I think Frantz Fanon would agree with you. I think Arthur Ashe would agree with you. I think Arthur Ashe said it in a lot of ways, and I heard him say this quote like 3 times when I was studying for this. He's like, I think I would have been a better tennis player if I have to worry about all this racism, right? I couldn't be like John McEnroe and just sleep, breathe, eat, tennis. I had to be great and then also worry about all these other pieces. So in many ways, he's a humanist. What I would say to that is, for us to then reckon with, right, the just scale and scope of resources that are being poured into constricting our consciousness like that, right? The degree to which, right, we're not allowed to talk about our histories, like that is being outlawed, right? The degree to which the way that we want to show up and care for one another, right, is being propagandized and pushed out of public conversation, right? There's a lot of resources, and if you start talking about like military budget, trillions of dollars poured into restricting the ways that we can see ourselves as human, right? So I agree with you on the solution. I think I'm trying to get us situated in the full, I guess, like systemic weight of what we're fighting against, if that makes sense. Natasha, I'm gonna talk to you later.
I know, we're gonna talk later.
Like, let me ask you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Sochan. I'm from the Caribbean. Just 2 quick points, really. The first one has to do with your stats show that I believe there were 4 to 5% of the mental health professionals are Black in the American landscape.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, based on the theme of your talk, whether we should re-examine the curriculum that trains mental health professionals across the broad spectrum so that it incorporates the range of psyches and so on of different ethnic groups. Mm-hmm. So that's one. I teach public health, so I'm a bit thick. The second point, I mean, maybe it's a bit, I don't know how to articulate this clearly, or I don't want it to be taken in a very negative context. I'm Indo-Trinidadian, and what I found is that to move ahead collectively as a group in societies that could have so many negative challenges or barriers is that you sometimes have to recognize your lived experience, articulate it, yes, but also, I don't want to say discard it, but you need to rise above that. And you need to consider that there is a brighter future ahead. So if we only delve in the challenges and the barriers, we may not necessarily realize our full potential. That's my little comment.
Yeah, I would agree with you. So what I would say is I used to run track, for example, right? And I agree with you, right? Like we need to recognize but not let that, right, stymie us in the progression. And so I think what I'm advocating for us is to become really good like hurdlers, right? It doesn't mean that you let that prevent you from moving forward, but if you were trying to run the race and you don't recognize that there's a hurdle in front of you, I did that a lot of times. Like you're gonna skid across the whole track, right? So we need to understand what's going on so we can, to your point, rise above it. When you have a good, I think, structural analysis, it allows us to attack with greater precision and to rise above as you're talking about. And I agree with the other point you're making too. I do think we need to expand curricula while we also return these tools and technologies to communities. So I think they're both great points that you're making. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And let's give Dr. Auguste another round of applause. Thank you for taking the time to come out and speak with us and be our keynote speaker. Thank you for all the insightful information that you've provided. So at this time, I wanted to switch into our next topic, and it's demystifying psychiatry. And I'm going to call on Faven Araya, who directs our community engagement and research program, to lead us through that and facilitate this discussion. And she'll introduce all the players and everyone that's going to be a part of this. But it's going to be a stimulating discussion. We look forward to that. So at this time, Faven Araya.
Marilyn encouraged that if you want to stand up and take a quick stretch, you can. I am trying to wrap my head around where we're at right now because my mind is blown from Dr. Auguste's presentation. I don't feel like it's often that we talk about mental health from the historical context, and we talk about it from that lens, so like I'm a little disoriented. But we are going to transition the conversation into thinking about what mental health looks like in practice. And to do that, I'm gonna welcome a wonderful guest of ours, Dr. Cassandra Raphael, who is a double board certified physician in adult and child adolescent psychiatry. She's a native New Yorker and proud Haitian American. That's 2 today. Dr. Raphael completed a master's in public health here at SUNY Downstate shortly after she started teaching and developing curriculum with the Health Science Academy at the Arthur Ashe Institute for Urban Health, so welcome back. Dr. Raphael completed her adult psychiatry residency and child psychiatry fellowship at SUNY Downstate with the goal of improving physical and mental wellness in the Caribbean American communities. She currently works at the Office of Mental Health, New York City Children's Center Brooklyn Day Treatment Program. There, Dr. Raphael treats patients and represents New York City's multicultural and multilingual youth with culturally sensitive and holistic psychiatric care. She is an expert consultant on mental health and parenting for various media outlets. Previous collaborators include JED Foundation, the Writers for Parent Magazine, Essence Magazine, and Forbes, among others. She has also been featured on Hot 97's Nessa's podcast. She also can be heard co-hosting the Trauma Code Radio with her husband, Dr. Simon Fitzgerald. To sustain her mental health, Dr. Raphael enjoys spending time with her 2 young children, reading especially banned books, exploring arts that highlight cultures of the African diaspora, and lastly, but very importantly, she works to improve her tennis game. Welcome, Dr. Raphael.
Thank you, Faven.
All right, so we're going to have a nice conversation, or try to have a dialogue around psychiatry. I think, as Dr. Auguste highlighted, that a lot of what mental health is centered around is this misconceived notion of what it should be. And I think a lot of it is rooted in the historical context of oppression. And so because of that, the field of psychiatry is oftentimes misconstrued. And so I think we want to start the conversation by thinking about, let's define psychiatry to understand how this can serve as a resource to our community. And so let's start the conversation with, when people hear the word psychiatry, they often imagine different stereotypes. How would you describe what psychiatry actually is and isn't?
Excellent first question. I guess as we engage in this conversation, I also just want to say thank you all for being here, for taking the time to want to learn. I'm eager to, be back and to have this conversation and enlighten as many folks as I can. And I invite your curiosity and your questions. So psychiatry is a medical specialty in which we look to understand and diagnose and treat disorders of the emotions, the mind, the thoughts, behaviors, and development. In our assessments, we follow the biopsychosocial model, and that means that we consider biological aspects, psychological aspects, and social aspects that all influence mental health and how we show up in the world. An example of a biological aspect would be maybe a developmental disorder, or how genetics interplays with how we present. Psychological factors include something like trauma. Social factors include how connected we are, what community supports we have access to, and all of these things put together influence, again, how we show up in the world. So that's, chiefly what we do in psychiatry. We have a few different modalities of treatment. I know that the common kind of misconception is that psychiatry is for medication, and that is all we are for, and there are avenues to get plenty other resources. But if you need meds, you go to a psychiatrist. When in fact, oftentimes we don't begin treatment with medications. We try behavioral interventions first. We want to understand the various factors that contribute to how somebody is presenting. And so there's an amount of talk therapy. We help to guide behavioral modifications as well. We do use medication, but it is a tool only if necessary. And I'd say that medication is definitely not the first place to start in many cases, specifically because, like I said, it's a tool that might help somebody who needs it or who might benefit from it get into the proper headspace to do the other work that I mentioned, which is the talk therapy and the behavioral modifications. So that's essentially what psychiatry is. It's also an evidence-based, ethics-based, and individualized practice in a way. We have to be very mindful of culture, context, individual nuances, and how those things impact the outcome that we'd like for our patients and what it is that the patient is prioritizing for themselves.
Thank you. My next thought is thinking about, how do you know when psychiatric care is needed, right? If I'm someone who's dealing with stress or anxiety, is my first thought, I need psychiatric services, or are there different pathways to seeking services, and how does someone end up receiving psychiatric services?
Well, I think, I know we're going to talk about a lot of different modalities as we continue the conversation, but I would say that an appropriate time to pursue psychiatric care specifically is when symptoms are persistent, developmentally kind of inappropriate, like if you have excessive aggression or excessive isolation, for example, there might be more needed, especially if you have these things persistently. you might need more than, community support, for example. And especially if the symptoms interfere with daily functioning and your ability to show up in the world as, at least as your best self. So if you're, unable to go to school, if you're a kid, when that's essentially the work of children is to go to school in an ideal world, right? So if you can't do those things, if an adult is not able to kind of, get up and operate and be productive and connect with others, these are all signs that there may be more going on than, than standard interventions might resolve on their own.
Right. And I think a lot of people probably experience waves of that, and trying to figure out when is an appropriate time is always, I think, the point that is the hardest to determine. But once that conclusion is made, I think I need services. I've been told that I need psychiatric services. This is a resource that's available, but it's oftentimes not utilized. And so what do you feel like are the barriers that get in the way of people utilizing these services?
In Dr. Auguste's talk and in, previous speakers have also addressed the same thing. We internally or within our communities, there's obviously the element of stigma, and the stigma comes from kind of carrying the misconceptions, which I don't know if I mentioned any misconceptions as yet about psychiatric care. No. Perhaps not. Right. So stigma is kind of perpetuated by carrying these misconceptions about what psychiatry is, and I think some of those misconceptions in underserved communities include perceiving that if you need to talk to a psychiatrist, that something must be very, very wrong, or that it's a dangerous situation. The perception that psychiatrists will only give medications. Very important in our community is the perception that psychiatry is necessary for folks who are weak, that psychiatry is, quote, not for people like us, right? That psychiatry is kind of culturally exclusive. So that's another common misconception. The confidentiality, feeling like, if you talk about the problems, if you name the thing, if you are too open about your problems, you're just going to perpetuate them and not actually just take the first step into changing a situation that doesn't suit you. So those kinds of misconceptions about psychiatry and psychiatric care are contributing to our own biases about what we think psychiatric care is as a community. And that's, internal to us. I think it's also very important to discuss things that are external to us. So structural or systemic illnesses or biases, for example, that get in the way of pursuing proper psychiatric care. So when I say those things, I'm talking about the reimbursement rates, for example, for mental health care in general, either through private insurance or through Medicaid. If the reimbursement rates are not great, it's hard for people to access care, right? Long wait lists because there are not very many psychiatrists, and even fewer who are folks of color, like maybe 2% of psychiatrists in this moment are Black, maybe 10% are non-white, right? And about 60+% are male when there's a large amount of female patients who might be trying to navigate some kind of trauma or overcome some kind of traumatic symptoms, that they'd perhaps feel more comfortable speaking to somebody who looks more like them, right? So those, and how accessible is medical education? I guess that's another thing, right? So when we're talking about systemic or structural matters, if medical education is not that easily accessible, or professional education is not that easily accessible, or it comes with a significant debt burden, it makes it that much harder for us to engage and follow the course and delay the gratification of a paycheck, right? So we kind of have to, I guess many of us feel compelled to start working either right away and not be able to pursue the information to do this job. And all of those things are structural matters. So we need to make education more accessible. We need to increase the number of people and the diversity of the workforce in mental health care. We need to have our workplaces make the time and access to care easier. It would be great if there would be better reimbursement rates for the services that might be needed in the community. So those are some of the barriers and perhaps some of the responses to those barriers.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate you naming the structural issues that get in the way. And I want to think about the present moment that we're in, and I feel like the structural issues are amplified right now with the attack on public health, the attack on immigrants. You feel that mental health is being impacted, like people are suffering, people are going through a whole lot of challenging moments and times.
Definitely.
And the systems that are supposed to be responsive to them and are supposed to be open to them are not. There are places where folks could be detained, for example. And so can you talk about how the present moment serves as a barrier to access to services and what that looks like right now when the need feels immense?
Two things come to mind pretty immediately when we think about, so in answer to your question, so two, I guess what current events or hot topics right now come to mind immediately, and one of them is cutting Medicaid, right? So about 30% of non-elderly patients who receive mental health care or psychiatric care are covered by Medicaid, right? The reimbursement rate's already not great. The wait lists are already long. And so, to remove the access for those folks is going to kind of flood the system. It's going to flood a system that's already overburdened, right? Or it's going to further marginalize folks who would hesitate to come for care. Now there's no reason, and then what happens if people are not able to show up in the world and engage in their role functioning is fewer goals pursued, and thus, the unhoused population may increase. Food security will decrease as well, and that actually brings me to the second thing is the SNAP benefits, right? So if we cut Medicaid, and then we cut access to food, and food security is not a sure thing, we're not only impacting the people who actually get the service, but also their families, the people who depend on them. And so the mental health of families as a unit, can decline if we remove access to certain resources that keep us well. And I think that we don't always name or pay particular attention to the things that keep us mentally well, but food security is one of them. A reliable paycheck is one of them. And it's not directly linked, but if that link isn't explicitly stated or obvious, I think if you consider what life would be like without some of those things, then it becomes much easier to kind of say, okay, I could see why just losing access to my food benefits, just losing access to my healthcare services, my community supports, it's going to be very clearly a direct relationship to how well I am mentally.
Right, and I think that makes me think about health as a human right? Like, we're having a conversation around not having access to food, access to healthcare, access to a safe environment. These are all basic human needs, and yet we are talking about systems that are taking those basic rights away. And so this is a part of a history of mistrust. This is why people don't want to connect with the healthcare system or don't believe in these institutions and their responsibility for taking care of the community. And so what role do you play as a psychiatrist in acknowledging the history of mistrust, the fact that the mistrust is being perpetuated by current policies and practices, and how do you bridge that gap?
I think you touch upon a few different things in that question. You do mention the medical mistrust, and I want to be very clear in distinguishing that from stigma, right? I talked about stigma and what the misconceptions are about what psychiatric care looks like, but then I also must be remiss to not acknowledge the the history of medicine that contributes to a rational amount of apprehension from our community when we're talking about, engaging in mental health care or medical care at all. Specifically, let's say the Tuskegee study or forced sterilizations, the history of Henrietta Lacks and kind of exploitation of certain populations. We have reason to be apprehensive. Hold on, I missed a part, I think, of your question.
It's just thinking about, so you're acknowledging the history of it in the
Yes.
medical system. So what role do you as a psychiatrist play in, especially a Black psychiatrist, in bridging that gap and ensuring that the historical context and the present moment are acknowledged, but also addressed in the way that you provide care?
I think that medicine, so I guess here's where I was going. I think that medicine still has a long way to go in leveling the playing field and getting equity in care, right? So as a Black psychiatrist specifically, having gone to medical school and residency in a world where Western medicine is largely created or dominated by one culture, how do you say, the expression, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's shed? Mm-hmm. Yes. If I want to know the nuances that make working in certain populations different, or the cultural differences that will arise from patient to patient, and removing the explanation burden that somebody has to, come in and say, oh, my grandma said this to me, and then they have to explain all of what that means before we can really decide, how that can contribute to the conversation we're having, right? So removing that explanation burden. Those are the things that we have to seek to know. I think as physicians, there's a lot of information there's a ton of information in medical school, but still, I think if you want to do it from a culturally influenced, respectful perspective, it takes more work outside of the textbooks sometimes. It takes conversations, it takes reading books by Frantz Fanon and several of the other folks that Dr. Auguste mentioned, to understand the history and decide what is an approach that will make the patient feel centered in all of our interactions as, patient and doctor.
So I just got the notice that we're out of time, which went by really fast. But I want to ask one question before we open it up to the audience. You are bringing up the concept of taking into consideration someone's identity, their culture, their backgrounds. And so as a Haitian American, you carry those things, and there's a level of consciousness that you bring to the table, I assume.
Me too, I hope so too.
As you provide care. And so what does that look like, and how can others who are either in the field, exploring the field, or exploring, or in a position where they are serving the community, how do you take culture, identity, religious beliefs, how do you take that and use it as a tool, a powerful tool, to empower people and to get them the type of support that they need?
You mentioned a little bit earlier that, not directly like so, but basically implied, right? That we're living in a time when people are being persecuted for who they are rather than what they've done, right? So it's important to create connectedness, create places of psychological safety, create places, even environments where people can be wrong, but called in. And to feel like not only do they benefit from having a community for their own interests, but also they feel like contributing to that community is productive for them as well, right? It gives them an identity, it gives them a place. So the kind of connectedness and in person, when possible, would be one of the things that I think are very important in terms of creating a safe place and removing some of the barriers to mental health care in our community. I'd say also normalizing and even initiating these conversations so that somebody doesn't feel, pardon me, so that somebody doesn't feel like having these issues is a problem in itself. everybody has something that they're trying to navigate, trying to figure out, something that they feel might be obstructing them, you know, in whatever their journey is, whatever their goals are. If we are able to name those things and identify the point where community support can help, and then mental health care can kind of support even more, just add another layer to the services and access, then that's important. So initiating these conversations, normalizing these conversations, just like what the symposium is intended to do. Those who are allies, you know, have a huge responsibility to this, continue to advocate for mental health care and services to be accessible in the school settings, in community-based organizations, which I know you can name several that might offer some mental health care services, or at least connect to mental health care services. I guess in times like now, when it feels as though so much that influences our mood and thoughts and behaviors are not within our immediate sphere of influence or control, the role of psychiatry, I would say, is to help folks find peace and power. And I don't want to conflate peace and acceptance, right? You know, there's the serenity prayer, the courage to accept, giving the serenity, right? To accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, right? So in peace, we find the power that we need to change the things that do not serve us, that do not serve our communities. And I think that that's the role of mental health care in times like now, finding our peace, finding our power, and building connectedness.
I love that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And so, as you highlighted, as a way of initiating the conversations, we invite any of you all to ask the psychiatrist any questions that you may have about the field, about the work, about the way that you can utilize the services, about the experience, about any misconceptions that you may have. So we have the mics up front, and then we also can bring a mic to your seat.
Hi, thank you so much for this whole morning. I think it's just been so enlightening. I'm Natalie Rubio Torrio. I have run an agency called Voces Latinas in Jackson Heights, Queens. One of our therapists is here with us. And one of the things that we have for years tried to think about is a community mental health model for us, for our community. We work with predominantly immigrant and migrant Latinos, and especially after these past 3 years, as a result of the influx of migrants, we're seeing the even more need for mental health services. And I'm feeling like we are on the right path after hearing from you and Dr. Auguste. Because what we don't ask enough is what has been working for you in terms of healing practices. And we're trained this way to kind of stay away from religion, spirituality, and I think just focus on like the Western medical model. And I guess it's a comment, but also a question. We know this doesn't work for all of our communities. We know we need to think out of the box. We know we need to ask people what helps and then incorporate that into their service plan. And that's what we're trying to build. But there's not, well, I will be calling upon you all, but there aren't many people or trainings or institutes that we could call upon to ask for guidance and ask for help, because we can be challenged when it comes time to how we're being trained. Maybe as example, mandated reporters, right. Or because I've been in those situations where, especially we have students, we have MSW students, and it could be very challenging when they come from the theoretical educational place to the practice with this particular culture. And so I'm just wondering how we navigate, maybe some resources where we could tap into, just to help us continue to build, because it is something that we feel and we need to offer our community to really heal. And we've also just started doing healing circles, and we're finding the power in healing circles for our community. but we also need a lot more guidance, resources, and just support.
Thank you for that. It seems that you're doing marvelous and very important work in the community. I'm tempted to get on my soapbox. Geez. But I think that there's, when we go from medical school to practice, I wish that the history of medicine in this country and in other countries and the value of more indigenous practices was more highlighted. I think it should be in medical education, because I think the easiest thing to do is to, somebody's child says, oh, you have high blood pressure, you need to go to the doctor. And they make the appointment, they come. But unless you're willing to hear them, talk about the tea that they think is helpful, and they're not gonna take the propranolol or whatever other thing that you have in mind. So we have to listen, and we have to put aside some of the biases that, as clinicians, that we come into these conversations with, and make space for the people who are coming to see us for our service. So I guess I'm proposing a systemic, which of course will take a longer time. A systemic solution is to begin this education as early as possible in the medical career. It can't happen like one and then the other. It has to all happen at the same time, Resources for, I guess, improving cultural competence, yeah? Well, I will say this. There's a lot of evidence to support that concordance between patients and providers optimizes outcomes, right? Typically in psychiatric practice, in mental health care, at least in this state, you're entitled to interpretation services. It's, almost even better if you can have an in-person bilingual interpreter or a bilingual provider, but of course that comes with its own barriers, right? Just getting the access to the education. I know that in terms of the resources, Faven, you might be very well versed on what community supports exist that might also be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you specific resources and we can talk afterwards, but I think one of the things that I'm taking away from this conversation is that the healing circles are done in practice with the community, but I also think that that needs to be done with the support systems, the people who are facilitating and providing access. And so how do we connect with one another? Because it seems like there's a very small percentage of psychiatrists and psychologists, right, and that probably is reflected in the other parts of the mental health field. But how do we come together and align our resources? How do we amplify our efforts to be able to serve our community? And I think that there's power in that. And so, yes, there are specific things that I can share with you after, but I think it's thinking about how do we do this in a more practical, sustainable, consistent way so that we can continue serving our community.
And also, I mean, I alluded to this earlier, but also in a preventive way, right?
Yeah.
We're not responding to a crisis. We're talking about these things up front. We're normalizing these conversations, in broad form, so that if somebody is struggling, they know that they're not alone, and they know that this is not something that's isolated and insurmountable. The support exists, and they know that because we have these conversations before a crisis even occurs.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's critical. So we have time for one more question. I saw one in the back. And then there's plenty of time during lunch. We have an hour to sit and connect and to share.
Come say hi. Yeah.
Hi. Can you hear me? Okay. Hi. So my name is Elizabeth Osborne. I work for JASA. I'm a resident service coordinator. So my question is, well, first, let me be real brief. I actually had an inpatient psychiatric visit in October, and I say that because I live in the Bronx, but I didn't even feel comfortable going to Bronx hospitals. And many people that I speak to, I've also worked with people that have Medicaid, And oftentimes they don't like Bronx hospitals either. People say that they were traumatized or that they got discharged early when they shouldn't have been. I've spoken to other people that didn't know where to get therapy and all. I like to set my friends up with various therapists and have resources. And I keep hearing that we have to advocate, but how does someone like me who doesn't yet have their master's advocate for more access to mental health care in the Bronx or better quality mental health care in the Bronx?
It's a brilliant question. And I just also want to say that your transparency and vulnerability is very powerful. One of the resources that I find very helpful are peer support programs. So people who have a certain lived experience learn how to engage others who might be having a similar experience, but whether or not they're insightful about, what might be necessary is a different thing, right? So I think the peer specialists are a wonderful and very helpful and supportive and collaborative group. So I would definitely start there. I would, like I said, your transparency is so helpful here too. Continue to have those conversations, continue to ask these questions. Continue to ask questions about what is available and why certain other things are not, because it's not happenstance. A lot of these things are very carefully decided without our representation in the room, frankly. Being sure to gain access to the, and when I'm talking about these conversations, making sure that the access to public funds for community health clinics, community-based organizations that are doing the work of connecting folks to care, that continues to exist. Continue to advocate for yourself. I think yesterday I had a young patient, he's like 16, and he's like, "What did I do?" And I said, "Well, you did something," but and he was shaking in his boots till we got to the office, and I said, "You advocated for yourself. You said, why did the medication look different than last time?" And this is important. You are coming for a service when you come to see psychiatry, when you come to mental health care. You don't have to necessarily accept whatever is put forth. In an ideal scenario, you have community or family support. You're not living in isolation, where even if you may not be able to speak, as fluently as you might want to about what might be helpful to you, people who know you can. And this is why the community aspect and the connectedness in mental health is paramount. I rarely do my job without speaking to either a grown-up of a kid or a sibling, somebody else who can help me understand what is this person's values, because maybe in this moment they might be more compromised than, how they'd like to represent themselves. But the value of those interactions is very, very helpful if the patient is not sure why they're with me, you know what I'm saying? So continue to advocate for yourself, advocate for your peers, and I would encourage everybody else here to do the same thing. Keep talking about it, keep asking the questions. And keep, if you know something is accessible in Manhattan and not in the Bronx, find out what it is and how they got it. And make sure that you can, when there are town halls and things, you say, look, this is something that I think we need here. The more we talk about it, the more we get. What is it, squeaky wheels? What is it? What is it?
I don't know the saying, but you're talking about being a squeaky wheel.
Exactly. Or closed mouths don't get fed. There, same thing. Yeah. The more we talk about these things, the more that we let people know that we know, the more they realize they cannot hide resources.
And also just add, don't let people think, or don't let the idea that you have to have a degree in order to be positioned to advocate. Think about the space that you occupy and what role you can play in elevating your voice and your concerns. And when you get that master's degree, it will just help amplify that. But it's not necessary.
I'm gonna get it anyways. Yeah. I'm getting it anyway.
Oh,
yes,
yeah, do
but I'm
that.
just saying-
Do that, yes, yes. Get that degree.
So
But
thank you for your question. Thank you for your transparency. We can continue this dialogue, but for the moment, I want to say thank you, Dr. Raphael, for coming back, for continuing to be a resource and to impart your wisdom.
Thank you very much, Fabian, for having me, and to the Arthur Ashe Institute, who has been so influential in my journey to medicine, to psychiatry, to teaching, and everything else. It's been an absolutely wonderful experience. It's an honor to be here with you all. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, before we go into our final session before lunch, which makes the next group a hard task for you, I'll ask Stacy just to come up briefly and let us just stretch or just take a moment before we move into the other group. I recognize you've been sitting for a long time, and so Stacy, if you can just come up quickly before I call the other group.
Hi, everyone. So before we take a stand, if you're able, I want us to just pause to take some breaths together. So again, just put your feet on the ground, get comfortable, support your spine if you can. And I want us to take just 3 deep breaths together. And then I'm going to ask you to stand if you can. So deep breath in through the nose. Fill the belly with air, and I just want you to hold it there for a minute, and now exhale through the mouth. Deep inhale. And hold, and exhale as hard as you can through your mouth. One last time, deep inhale. And this time I want you to bring your shoulders all the way up to your ears, if you can. Hold. And exhale as hard as you can and drop the shoulders. Now I want to ask you to stand if you can. And I want to ask you to just move your head from side to side. Then if you can, full circle. And reach as high to the top as if you're reaching for a solution to all these systemic issues that control our society. But reach as if your life depends on it, because it does, for us to change. And then I want you to take a deep breath while your hands are up in the air. And as hard as you can, drop your hands to the bottom as you got rid of the systemic issues. In many cultures, ancestrally, they danced to move trauma out of their body, okay? So in the absence of music at the moment, I just want you to bring to mind a song that makes you move, and I just want you to shake to it or move to it in your head. And again, just releasing, right, all the things that we carry because we live in this society, okay? So shake, reach up, wave, say goodbye, because we're not going to be the same after today, okay? Then drop really hard, take a deep breath in, hold, and release. Thank you so much.
You may be seated. Thank you so much, Stacey. And I'm thankful to Faven and Dr. Raphael for their presentations today. At this time, you've heard about systemic racism, and you've heard about the historical context. You've heard about psychiatry and the things that we need to do in terms of listening and how we need to dismantle some things there. And a lot of people have been asking about resources. So the next group that's going to come up, they'll talk about wellness within reach. And this is from the Brooklyn Free Clinic, and I'll call Janelle, Daniela, and Asma to come up, and so that they can share some resources with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for staying and listening to this last talk right before lunch. We'll try to keep it brief. I'm Janelle. I'm one of the co-chief of operations of the Brooklyn Free Clinic.
Hello, my name is Daniela Diaz. I'm also a fourth-year medical student, and I'm one of the co-directors for psychiatry at the Brooklyn Free Clinic.
And I'm Asma. I'm like Daniela, also a medical student.
Okay, so just to provide a little bit of context, the Brooklyn Free Clinic, or the BFC, was founded by a group of medical students to provide primary care to the uninsured population of Brooklyn. And we've been operating since 2008 and are Brooklyn's only student-led free primary care clinic. So in 2014 to 2015, we were renamed to the Ann Castor Brooklyn Free Clinic in memory of our first physician volunteer at the BFC. And our overall mission is to address health disparities in Brooklyn, as well as doing this through service and education at SUNY Downstate. Our vision is that every patient has the resources they need to be healthy, and every student becomes a socially conscious provider. And our devoted medical director right now is Dr. Kaiser Islam. The community that we serve is largely East Flatbush, but we really serve any patient who does not have insurance. And so in East Flatbush right now, or at least the latest data showed, that 17% of individuals are uninsured. And this is in comparison to 13% in New York City, as well as 12% in Brooklyn overall, showing that we have a higher rate. And so who are our patients? So at the end of 2024, we saw 472 patients, and the majority of our patients were female, identified as Black, as well as Hispanic and Latino, which is similar with the population or the demographics of our population here in East Flatbush, which you can see on the pie chart on the right. So common needs of our patients here are primary and preventative care, as well as chronic disease management, particularly hypertension, as well as diabetes, and mental health services, which we're gonna go into a little bit more next. And you know, there are several structural, financial, as well as social barriers that limit access to consistent care. You know, some of the examples are language barriers and limited availability of culturally concordant care, as well as, you know, recent immigration or relocation, financial instability that makes healthcare not as much of a priority as other necessities like food and housing, as well as transportation and time constraints, and difficulty navigating the healthcare system and distrust of the healthcare system. And overall, all of these barriers contribute to delayed care as well as fragmented follow-up. And this, you know, leads to reliance on safety net services like the Brooklyn Free Clinic and community-based clinics that are accessible to the community. So in terms of our operations, if anyone has patients that might benefit from these services, we are located at 470 Clarkson Avenue, Suite A, which is right on the other side of the SUNY Downstate building within the University Hospital of Brooklyn. And we operate every Wednesday from 5 to 10 p.m. Year-round. And we tend to have first contact and follow-up health maintenance visits, as well as work physicals and non-emergent acute care, so primary care services. And we also have the opportunity to do referrals to specialty services all around University Hospital of Brooklyn, as well as Kings County, and cancer screening programs that is available through Betty Jung, our nurse that helps us with that. We also offer lab work on site, so phlebotomy, STD tests, as well as pap smears. And other additional on-site services we have are medical interpretation, needs assessments, HIV rapid testing, as well as patient education and psychiatric services. I also just wanted to say that, you know, we are able to do this through the services or the volunteering of our students, which is multidisciplinary, that encompasses, you know, our medical school, physical therapy, nursing team, as well as like occupational therapy and all the rest of our schools here, including public health and others. So, yes, we're going to go into more of the psychiatry services.
So when patients come into the Brooklyn Free Clinic for their primary care services and share any concerns they have regarding psychiatry, whether it's symptoms of depression, anxiety, or other psychiatric symptoms, they're referred to us at BFC Psychiatry specifically. Ozma and I, as the co-directors of BFC Psychiatry, receive the patient's like a chief complaint, a brief kind of summary of the concerns that they expressed during their primary care visit in clinic. And we reach out to them via email first. Through this email, we let them know that we were told that they were interested in psychiatric services, and we schedule a phone call. So this initial phone call at an agreed upon time is our initial intake. And as you can see on the slide, we discuss a variety of things in terms of their past, psychiatric history. We go through their chief complaints, their goals of care, whether this is primarily for medication management, or some patients want to discuss their options for therapy, or both. We discuss both over the phone with them. We go through their past diagnoses, if they have had any, if they've ever been on any psychiatric medications, any prior experiences with therapy that they've had before, what worked and what didn't work for them, just so we have a full picture and we can kind of point them in the right direction. Another thing that's important for us to talk about with our patients during this initial intake phone call is their social support. So we kind of discuss a little bit about their family and their peer relationships to kind of see who's helping them, if anyone at all, during their lowest periods in terms of mood. And lastly, we do a little bit of screening. We screen for substance use, suicidality, and depression and anxiety. For screening for depression and anxiety, we use the PHQ-9 and the GAD-7 to kind of gauge the severity of their symptoms so that we know how to move forward with them. So if a patient is interested in medication management, in certain cases we can help them with that directly at the Brooklyn Free Clinic. The first step in this process is to set them up with an in-person primary care appointment, especially if they haven't been to the Brooklyn Free Clinic in person before. And this is just to establish, a relationship with the patient and to get them in with a full comprehensive assessment. So at this visit, we address both their psychiatric and their medical needs, if any. At this visit as well, our clinic's primary care provider for the night may initiate a short-term SSRI, which is an antidepressant, in cases where it's appropriate. So patients can pick up their SSRI at Life Care Pharmacy, which is our partner, free of cost. If they're able to cover the cost for the medication, then we are able to send the medication to a pharmacy of their choice as well. Then our next steps in terms of psychiatry is we want to really make sure we're closely following up with these patients that we're prescribing medications to. So Ozma and I will send them emails maybe a week or two after their inpatient appointment just to make sure that they aren't experiencing any side effects. And then after that, we schedule them with in-person appointments every 3 months just to follow up with them, see if they need any refills, any changes to the medication, and just to also, it's really important for us to keep that relationship with them ongoing for as long as they need.
So I know we talked about medication, but also a big part of this was also patient-centered care. So if patients wants therapy, we wanted to make sure there's initiatives for that. So actually last year we started this psychotherapy elective. It was funded by an APA grant, which we were very happy about. It kind of expanded a lot of the medical student education. We tend to focus on medication, and I think one thing we learned from the morning was just being able to ground our care, not, in the context of our patients. And so this kind of was a very good way to kind of incorporate therapy into the clinic. Really quickly, I know we're kind of running over time, but these are fourth-year medical students who are supervised by a psychiatrist and a resident, and it's working well, and we have, it's ongoing. And so it's also telehealth, so that's another kind of aspect to expand the care, because that can be a great way for patients to connect if they're not comfortable, or just offer that, especially if they're working or they're busy, and really understanding the patient's situation. Once again, just for the sake of time, I'll go through this quickly. Yeah.
So for patients who aren't interested in participating in our medical student elective or the solution-focused therapy that we offer, or if space is limited at this time and our students aren't able to take on a new patient, we of course invite our patients to remain on the wait list for our elective, and we'll let them know as soon as possible when a spot is available for that. But if not, we tend to refer them to these two external clinics for therapy. So the first being the SUNY Evening Training Services Clinic. BFC can provide a direct referral to this clinic as it is through Downstate. At this clinic, our senior psychiatry residents provide free psychodynamic psychotherapy sessions for patients on a weekly basis. It's virtual, and they really work with the patient's schedule. So the way this works is that they provide us with a standardized intake questionnaire. We send that to the patient sends it back to us, and we kind of directly connect them to the SETS clinic. If this isn't an option that is appropriate for the patient, then what we tend to do is give them the information for Kings County's various adult outpatient psychiatry clinics. And that's because Kings County accepts walk-in appointments. So for that, we just give them the schedule of when Kings County's clinics are open, and they can go in there for a brief initial visit and get started with the providers at Kings County. But we also don't limit our resources there. We also provide all of our patients with these two links so that they can explore other community resources on their own time. So the first is the Low Cost Therapy in NYC website. This is a website that we found that kind of lists a bunch of different clinics all over the 5 boroughs, and all of these services are either operate on a sliding scale or they're free of charge, which is really helpful for our patients, especially those who don't live close to the Brooklyn Free Clinic and prefer a more convenient location in terms of clinics. And this is also really helpful for patients who aren't interested in the specific types of therapy services that we can provide. And the second website is the National Alliance on Mental Illness website. This website is also really helpful for patients to find support groups and get connected with peers to really discuss and find that support with those who are going through similar things to them.
Again, really quickly, just to tie the conversation together, and also the phenomenal speakers in the morning. We're kind of honored to be here. We're kind of a side thing. So, just like the community does face a lot of barriers, and, whether it be lack of insurance, discussing social determinants of health, there's long wait times, unfortunately, when seeing these providers, of course, the structural barriers, the oppression, and all of that. But one of from our end, one of the proposed solutions is having more mental health integration into primary care settings. So primary care settings, these are patients coming in for regular visits, but if we screen for mental health, we kind of reduce that stigma, normalize talking about mental health concerns. And then, of course, future directions, continuing to provide that culturally sensitive care, events like these that kind of promote awareness of issues, and then continue to build community partnerships. This is our website and our Instagram. Please follow, and then also our email if you want to stay connected. Thank you.
So thank you so much. Let's give them another round of applause. So this has been an exciting morning, right? For everyone that came out, we had the ground set, we had our breathing exercises, we started off correctly, we talked about Arthur Ashe, who he was, and it's amazing that so many people have the connection to Arthur, whether they play tennis or want to play tennis or don't play tennis like I do. But one of the things that's so important as we think about mental health and we think about the historical segment of this, our keynote speakers spoke about that. You heard about the work that we are doing with peers, and the peers came up and they talked about the impact of that work, how mental health is such a big deal, because these students are able to go and tell others about what they've learned. They're able to share resources, and that's important. And we know that there is historical racism. We know that the system is fractured, but we also know that there are solutions and there are things that we can do. And so we heard from our physician, our psychiatrist, Dr. Raphael, who talked about some of the things that are happening and how we need to really rethink things, how we need to listen as clinicians, listen to patients, how we need to have our voice heard by being transparent and talking about the things that are happening amidst all the trials that may be going on. And yes, there are barriers, there are hurdles that we need to overcome. Our students came up and talked about some of those resources that are available. Who knew about the Brooklyn Free Clinic? How many people knew about it? But everybody at Downstate should. But in general, that's a resource. That's a resource that is available, that people that can go out and access that. And that work is important. One of the things that you'll find in your bag, there may be a resource guide, and it includes mental health resources too. So when you have a chance to review that and peruse the things that you've seen, you can get some resources there. But that's our morning, and so this afternoon, you get to dig deeper and you get to be interactive, and it's an exciting session. I know that I'm talking a lot before lunch and some people are hungry, but I want you to come back after lunch, come back here so that we can continue and so that you can hear about the different sessions that are available. They are exciting, so I ask that you stay the entire day, enjoy this day. This is a space that's safe, that we are able to talk about these difficult issues, but also to come up with solutions and to help each other as we heal within a community. So thank you so much. Good afternoon once again. Thank you. So we've come towards the end of our day today, and I want to again thank you for being here. And I hope you had a wonderful time in whichever breakout session you chose to be in. I did the paint and heal, and it was great to just sit and take a pause and paint. But as we close out right now, I'd like to call Humberto Brown, who has worked with us for so many years. And he is the Director of Health Disparities and New Constituencies Development. And so I'll call him up to just summarize and just provide closing remarks. After he's done, Faven will come back just for a brief moment, and then you can go outside and enjoy refreshments. Humberto.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to want to be here. I wasn't feeling too healthy today, but I know I had to come here. So I just saw you intentionality matters, right? And I was very pleased that in spite of a very cold day, some of us, even though we have left our tropical country for a long time, we don't stop being tropical, right? A little coldness scares us. So at first I want to thank all of you for coming to this event, showing up, because that's the first thing I want to remind us of, that it's been South Africa for a long time, the Mandela period, and even after all the hardship, the South Africans would say, it's still in our hands. I always remember, it's still in our hands. So I start there because we're in a very difficult moment. We're in a very challenging moment. And one of the things we try to do, the work that we do, and the collective of the organization that we work with, is to create, for me, I'm an old Pan-Africanist, is to create freedom spaces. Spaces that we can analyze, think, and invent possibilities. Because I think we spend a lot of time in reaction. We spend a lot of time defending ourselves, and we don't invest enough time in spaces where we can construct alternative. So I want to say that the purpose of this event is to do what we've been trying to do for many years, make CBOs, community organization, ordinary citizens know that we're empowered to establish agency for change. I think that's the first thing we want to acknowledge. When we talk about community engagement, it's not a slogan. It is a strategy. It is a vision that we didn't begin. It's a long legacy of oppressed people around the world. And in this country specifically, the African American and indigenous people's experience of, in spite of everything, constructing new possibilities. And we're in one of those moments. If in the area of work that we chose to honor Arthur, 33 years of his work, is his legacy as a social justice person. Is his legacy as someone that was courageous and respected, his legacy of standing up and speaking out and representing a long tradition of the river as Mississippi River is, where we come and we continue to create and move. So that in that tradition, we organize this event. And since we've been doing work in mental health for a while, we wanted to address the complexity of it. And for those of you who participated, you see we cover the multiplicity of the experience of mental health, emotional healthness, with Auguste presentation of understanding communities and that knowledge and experience and strength is born in the communities. That there's a history of our people constructing those alternatives. Everything in mental health, even at this point, has been transformed because we demand that it transform. The DSM system, which diagnosed it, if you sit in DSM 2 or 3, to be gay, to be someone who defending yourself from police aggression was considered illness. To refuse, if you look at the DSM from there to now, that has to recognize LGBT, trans people, because it's still the legacy of we trying to overcome enslavement, colonialism, a society that exclude, invisibilize everyone else, but a white concept. And we consistently insisting that we exist, that we matter, and we need to create a society that is inclusive. And that's why we deal with health and emotional health, because it's one of those areas that impact all of us. And I think Auguste's work was to show you the complexity that is not diagnosis system, but each of us brings something to the room when we come in, because we know the experience of where we came from. And you have to trust that versus people telling you that it's not scientific, you didn't get it. It's about trauma, and that experience matters, we know it, and we can find the strength to address it. And that's why we believe in community engagement. That's why Arthur left his name for somebody who will do something from the ground, not an Ivy League university that just use it for other purpose. The second presentation by the sister, Dr. Rafael, is in the other part of it, psychiatry. And she covered, some of us have worked in mental health and psychiatry for a while, but it covered the complexity of it. The difference between a biological diagnosis, schizophrenia or bipolar, versus just emotional issues. And what we try to do in this work is create the kind of education and knowledge for us to use as practical tools to help our community navigate this environment that systemically and structurally discriminate, exclude, treat us differently. So that was the first thing. And one thing I summarize of those two people, that some of the challenges are faced there, right? One, if you're a professional, what do you do from your professional level to what you do socially? So most of the time when you become a professional and you're in a system, you're forced to challenge that system, to question how the patient are treated, to question if those diagnoses are appropriate for that group. So you're struggling within, and you're creating a community that find the ways to develop manners to defend themselves. Because they see you in there, and they hope that you're a voice for them. They hope that Augustine used a lot of historical context. Because a good old Guyanese friend of mine, very important intellectual, was assassinated in this country, Walter Rodney, used to always say, the first science that we need to know is history. If you have the wrong history, no matter what discipline you're training, your analysis is going to be wrong. You're going to be supporting system of oppression, sexism, homophobia. So we have the history, that's why it's important. It's not just a subject. It's a matter of grounding us who we are. In the Pan-African world, we talk about the bird of Sankofa. And it's a bird that, the only bird that can fly looking backward. Because he looks of our past history, he brings it to the present, and he visions the future. And that's what the tradition of Pan-Africanism. We resist our dehumanization. We don't make people take away our right to love. Bad people go through a lot of things, oppressed people. But we don't lose the right to love. And if we're in a society today that they're even discussing how they want to re-exclude us again, it's because we have had the imagination and the creativity of constructing a new society, a new way of thinking, of feeling, of acting, and there's no way around that because it wasn't constructed for us. So that's what we try to do when we do this work, is make sure that the academic training, the different things that we're doing, we apply for community to empower themselves. That community to understand it, break it down. Tools to defend yourself, not this abstract stuff distance from you. And when you look at the work that we do with the young folks, the peer, which I'm always proud of, or part of in the beginning of that process, to see what empowerment of young people is. Because when they're empowered, as Fanon, Frantz Fanon always says, there's a generation that's going to defend the future of what they inherited. They stand up. They can try to eliminate the books or intimidate them. When they're educated in their history and they know their roots, the roots of a tree are always deeper than you see the tree. It goes far away. And that's what we do with these young people. I'm always proud to see them come in and secure, learn, and then proudly tell us, I had to teach my mom issue about mental health. She doesn't understand it, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it switched the level of confidence, of knowledge, and the application to themselves. Because as you know, adolescent and young adults is the most difficult age we all go through. A lot of uncertainty, a lot of unspoken stuff, a lot of invisibility in a society that just want you to grow up and do well, and don't stop to deal. I just saw a New York Times article just a week ago where it's worse today. The depression of the 17 years old, the level of isolation, the level of disconnect to this generation. What we try to address is empower them to be, in that tradition of Fanon, a tool of transformation. So those are the things that we try to do today, and I hope that people see it not just as a conference, an event. I don't believe in event for events. I think events is spaces where we organize, we think to move forward, always to transform, to have an imagination that things can change, right? And for those who went to the other after program that we have outside, I went to one, the meditation and thing. And it reminded me of something that I always say we discuss, right? Some of us work stressed out in many fields. Some of us who are political activists spend a lot of time in different places of the world and doing things. But a lot of time we don't know how to take care of ourselves. We don't know how to meditate, how to heal. And because some of us are scared of the tradition and the religion that we come from, we think that voodoo is diabolic, and Santeria, and Candomblé, religion of the African tradition, we lost them, so we don't know how to heal. So this also was important for us, to people, to use their creativity in art, or to heal, to find a way. So when you bring it together, you see that we had a day constructing some alternative for the moment that we're in. It's not just an event. And we're in a very dangerous period. Everything that we thought was stable has become unstable. Citizenship, kids who were born here, safety net at your home, how our history has been removed from libraries. We have been silent from speaking, and so many colleagues in universities who have been threatened to lose their position if they speak about certain things. We are in a very difficult, a woman, an old African-American woman from Mississippi, civil rights movement. I was talking to her, she says, Humberto, we've been in this place before. She said, this is like Reconstruction. After abolition of slavery, they did everything to destroy us when they had promised us freedom, land, possibility, but we were so organized, we did so much so fast that they lynch us, imprison us, create Jim Crow society, black one place, the other place. So we've been here when we have done things and they try to destroy. And I say it in this term because everything is political. Politics is not an abstraction. If you want to know somebody's policies, you have to know their politics. This is the only country where we hide behind policy and we don't talk about politics. Any other place you go, people want to know what is your politics, you got to know what is your policy. If you're homophobic, you can't produce policies for inclusion LGBT. If you're racist, you're not going to create policy. So those two things are interrelated. And I said, people, when you look at that, then you see what is the practice come out of there. So I want to end asking you to continue in this partnership that we have with many of you. I want to ask you not to be intimidated by this moment. For the kind of work we do, I know a lot of us are feeling the pressure. The Latin Americans, I spend a lot of time in the African community, and nobody feels safe. Even when three people in the family are citizen or resident, we are destabilized. So this is time for courage. This is a time to remember what is our history, where we came from, and always remember what is our legacy. We don't let them take away our right to love humanity, love ourselves. We resist and we insist in our humanity, and we always propose in a better society, a new one, a more loving one. And you shouldn't be ashamed to aspire for that. It's not crazy, it's not ultra to desire a society that's inclusive, more humane. Because we're in one of the moments that we're doing something that hasn't been done before in a long time. Most of the society now are the diversity, New York, Paris, London, are people who are formerly colonized and now we're in the same space. From the Caribbean, from Latin America, from different parts of Africa, 50 countries in Africa. And different languages, I grew up speaking 4 languages. My grandparents, Martinique, this, that. You have to find a way not to let them divide us, but know that we're creating a new citizenship that is inclusive of all. You can't exclude the new generation. You can't just leave them out. No good school, no possibility, no student help, age. We can't let them leave the LGBT and trans community as the enemy of civilization. We have to stand up now, because everything that was won before is on the block. From women's rights, who would believe that in the U.S. you would have no rights of abortion in 2025? Who would believe that you're born in the USA questioning if you'll be citizen or not? Those are severe issues. And those are politics that create policy of dehumanization of us. So we did this today in the name of Arthur Legacy. Stand up for social justice, insist that a better world is possible, and remember that we are here because our ancestors and others insist in the same thing, and that we're not going to stop. We're going to continue pushing and keeping that imagination open, because that's our legacy. A better society is possible, one that's inclusive, with love, compassion, empathy, and peace. So I just want to end there and say, this work, and we say in Spanish, la lucha continúa in Portuguese, la lucha continúa, the struggle continues, and that we continue to do this. And no matter what space you're in, academic, community, public school, there's a space for us to do something, to resist and to keep connected, not to get isolated. Keep connected and keep seeing each other, because at the end, we're going to win. There's no way backward. We're going to win. And this generation have to be convinced about that. They're educated, they have the capacity to do it, and they should resist. Insist, resist, and then we'll be victorious. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Umberto, for putting everything into context and tying everything together. I hope that for those of you who made it through the entire day, thank you for your time, your energy. We hope that you walked away learning something, connected with someone, or at the very least ate a good meal. I just want to close out with a couple housekeeping items. One, in the afternoon session, everyone went to 3 different rooms that was focused on three different modalities, but there was one common theme of putting together a quilt. And so I just want to, can we present the quilt that everyone collectively put together? I don't know if we have 2 hands that we can. We're gonna have to read it, but so this, everybody was prompted to illustrate what justice looked like, what justice could look like. And so everyone took their creativity to design something. And it started with an individual vision, an individual perspective that obviously is intertwined and collected.
Read off a couple things that folks said. So, freedom to envision endless possibilities, making space for the voices that go unheard. The shades of balanced, the scales are balanced. Ooh, okay. When you do what you love, you're never working a day in your life. Find your passion. Love that. All right, let me go on this side. Like the wind, I want to be free where I go. One last one. Motivation for more help in my community to create a happy environment. So these are beautiful. So this is just an illustration of what our individual dreams and visions can do as a collective. And so hopefully a year from now we can think about how we're one step closer to this vision. So thank you. Couple other housekeeping, or now we're in housekeeping items. If you are someone who is a social worker, a physician, please remember, if you didn't already announce or provide your credentials, this counts as CME credits, continuing education. And so please, just as a reminder, if you haven't, please make sure that you touch base with our registration folks so that you can get credits for being here and your time. And then the third thing was everyone completed a survey. Is there anyone who didn't complete an evaluation survey who wanted to complete a survey? So we have paper ones if you couldn't engage digitally. But if not, we did promise that for those that submitted a survey, that we were going to draw 2 names that we're going to get a $150 gift card to go to the Life Wellness Center in Bedside, Brooklyn. And that's a local organization that provides therapeutic services. So that's massages, it's acupuncture, it's Reiki, there's the sound bath. There's lots of events and workshops. So if you didn't get a chance, too late now. We drew 2 names, so hopefully folks are here. The first name was Cheryl Marriott. Yeah! So you'll get a gift certificate for Life Wellness Center. We have your email address, but we're also going to give you a Awesome. Congratulations, Cheryl. Okay, and the second one, it's an email address, so I'm not sure. Clue Cario? Ah, that's you. Congratulations. You also get a $150 gift card to Life Wellness Center, and you also get the wellness box. Okay. And then the last thing is just doing some brief acknowledgments. As Kenya mentioned, this has been 5 years in the making, although the work of the Institute has been in existence for 33 years, celebrating that today. And so I want to acknowledge our leadership. Dr. Marilyn Fraser, Umberto Brown, you guys have been leaders for this organization. You guys have given us space and guidance to create, and as a result, we've been able to develop this amazing program. So I want to thank you both for your leadership. I also want to acknowledge Stacy Wright, who contributed a ton of ideas, but also her time and her effort to show up day in, day out, managing multiple responsibilities. And I think this has been a tough year for everyone. And so I just want to acknowledge you and for your commitment and dedication to our team and for always bringing new ideas to the table. So this symposium is in part because you dreamt it. So thank you. I want to thank our staff, the Institute staff. If you are part of the Institute, please stand up. So that's community engagement, that's Health Science Academy. This has been a collaborative effort. This is an anniversary event. It represents the institution as a whole, and it took the entire team to show up, to plan, to put out fires, and I think that that's a reflection of what it takes to put an event together. It's grounded in teamwork. So I want to acknowledge and thank everyone for showing up and being a part of this day in and day out. I want to thank our partners, our barbershops, our salons, our community-based organizations, our academic partners, our faith-based leaders, our CTHE members. I want to thank you all for coming from Maryland. Where's Maliva?
up there from Maryland and Queens, the different boroughs, thank you for supporting us today and for supporting us throughout the work that we've been doing collaboratively. So thank you to our partners for showing up for us today and every day. And then I want to do a special thank you to 2 members of our team who, one was at the start of the program, so Kenya Kirkman, if you can stand up. And Tynesha Morris, if you can stand up. Kenya came in at the start of the program with no idea what she was getting herself into. Perhaps a little bit of resistance, a little bit of trust building, but the 5-year journey, I think, has been incredible. And I think to be able to do it with you, to witness your growth, your development, the ideas, the creativity, the level of commitment, the late days, the nights, including last night. I want to thank you for being deeply committed to this work. Tynesha came in 2.5 years ago, also blindsided. That's like what we do at the Institute. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into until you show up. And Tynesha came in at the height of our work. I think one of the first events was traveling to DC to work with 150 youth. And Tynesha came in like ready to support, hands down, and that's the role that she's played day in and day out. So I just want to do a special thank you for the work that you guys do. This has been the largest program with the largest reach and the quickest growing program that we've had in our portfolio for a while, and it's in part because of these 2 and the supportive staff that have been a part. So I want to say thank you, and do it with flowers. I'm also a magician. So thank you, Kenya, Tynesha, and our team, our partners, and for everyone that came in on a cold, very cold, not snowy day. So thank you, everyone. No.
We also get St. Mariah a hand of applause as well. When I started 5 years ago, yeah, we've come a long way. But tremendously, just want to thank you for your leadership, your support over the years. So this is half yours, this is mine.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Kenya. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We're going to celebrate in community now in the atrium where we had lunch, but there will be desserts and some snacks so we can indulge in some fellowship. Thank you, everyone. Oh, wait, one more. I forgot. I even wrote it down. This work is hard. And you guys know that the funding, the political climate has affected our funding. And so if you're able to support individually or can get us connected to organizations, funders, please use this QR code to support our work. Thank you.